Hello, and welcome to Good News Rhode Island, the show about Rhode Island and the people and places and events that build our communities that make Rhode Island a great place to live. And there are always people working behind the scenes and then telling us what's going on in places we cannot go ourselves. Today we have Todd McLeish here, who's the writer of several books, works basically in South County, but goes all over our oceans, Narragansett Bay and out along the New England coast, watching for fish and for deep sea creatures, but also has done a book about our own Rhode Island and the things that are endangered. So thank you for being here, Todd. I'm sure there are thousands of things we could talk about, but we'll just introduce people to your books today.
Thank you very much.
Here. And thank you. You write basically for URI, is that right?
Well, my official full-time job is at University of Rhode Island, writing about all the different science things that go on there, writing for the website, writing for newsletters, the alumni magazine, and so on.
And your interest is in science, but you are a trained scientist, or?
I am not a trained scientist. I frankly have a rather limited scientific background, but when I got out of college, I sort of became very interested in the environment and wildlife, birds in particular, which got my attention, and decided at that point that I wanted to write about biology by volunteering with the biologists who are doing research around the region and then writing about those experiences.
And what they're doing is pretty amazing, isn't it? And the rest of us would know nothing about it if you hadn't written about it, which is really important.
Well, it certainly is fun for me to learn about the scientific process and how do scientists go and study various wildlife, study habitats, and then I'm sort of the one that gets to communicate about that research to the rest of the Rhode Islanders.
And habitats are changing, aren't they, unfortunately or fortunately?
They are indeed, and not in a good way in a lot of cases. Certainly we have situations where the air is getting cleaner, the water is getting cleaner, but still there are other issues related to pollution and plastics in the ocean and lots of other issues that are degrading habitats.
I didn't read much about rewilding in your book that I did read, but let's start with golden wings and hairy toes. And what you did was you went around the land mass of Rhode Island and found out about creatures and insects, et cetera, that are endangered because of changes in our environment.
For the most part, that's right. Not just Rhode Island. This is all about New England. So I spent time in all 6 states, meeting with biologists, helping them in the field with their research, writing about those experiences, and talking about the challenges that each of these species, rare species, are facing. Some of which are somewhat natural issues, some of which are certainly man-made issues that are causing these species to struggle. And it's just been a great learning experience for me, and I'm enjoying sharing those stories with my readers. Well,
I opened the book to the ringed bog haunter, and as a poet, I love that name, But tell me a little bit about the dragonfly. Is that what it is?
It's a dragonfly. Ringed bog hunter is perhaps considered Rhode Island's rarest dragonfly. It's found in about a dozen, maybe 20 different ponds in Rhode Island, mostly in South County and the western part of the state. There's a few ponds up in Massachusetts and New Hampshire and Vermont as well, New Hampshire and Maine as well, but the bulk of the population is here in Rhode Island. And it's the earliest flying dragonfly that we have in Rhode Island. If you see a dragonfly flying around in early April, it's likely to be a ringed bog hunter. And it's just a spectacular creature. It doesn't look particularly exciting. It's kind of brownish and with gold stripings on it. But it's rare. It loves bogs with little sphagnum moss and cranberries in it. And it's really struggling with water quality because many of the ponds that it lives in, they are having runoff from lawns and fertilizers and other things into the ponds and degrading the water quality.
Does it have the lacy wings that we think of as being part of dragonflies?
So they certainly do. Most people aren't familiar with sort of the life cycle of dragonflies. They only fly as an adult for about 3 weeks, and that's the case with most dragonflies around. But they then lay their eggs in a pond, and the larvae that hatch from those eggs live in that pond for an entire year before they emerge, transform into adult dragonfly, and fly around for another 3 weeks to begin the process. So really that aquatic life where they're spending a whole year is really the most important part of their habitat.
And a lot of times these streams are what people think of as just abandoned, or that stream over there, or that bog over there, not as something that needs to be preserved, and because there are rare things in it.
Correct, and there hasn't been a lot of work to study dragonflies in most parts of the country, so we don't really know which species are rare and which particular ponds and streams are important. There was a 5-year dragonfly census in Rhode Island, one of the first in any state in the country, and I participated in that. We discovered that there are 137 different species of dragonflies in Rhode Island, and I believe it's 107 in Burrillville alone, and another 107, not necessarily the same ones, in South Kingstown alone. So those are the two communities that have the largest number of dragonfly species. Who would have guessed?
I know. And is there any place that people can read that census? And see the variety as it is drawn or pictured?
There's actually a publication that's being put together about the census and all the pictures and the habitat maps and so forth of where they're found. I don't believe it's available just yet, but it should be soon.
Tell me about a bird that's endangered in Rhode Island.
One of the birds that I'm particularly interested in is something called the roseate tern. Roseate has a little pinkish rosy-colored belly, although it's very hard to see. It's a tern, T-E-R-N, is closely related to gulls. There are about 3,500 pairs of them that breed here in southern New England, mostly in small uninhabited islands in Buzzards Bay, but also along the Rhode Island coast and a few other islands. And it's a bird that, on one hand, it doesn't have such a bad life. It spends its winters in the Caribbean and its summers here in southern New England. That's not a bad life as far as I'm concerned.
Sounds good.
But they're struggling with predator problems, with gulls coming and eating the eggs and the chicks, with mammals like raccoons coming to the breeding islands and eating the gulls and the chicks, and even in some cases, great horned owls flying from the mainland to these breeding islands and eating the adults. So it's a real struggle for them to continue to thrive on these small uninhabited islands and raise their young while dealing with these predators.
I'm sorry to ask this question, but isn't that normal?
It is normal, that is sort of a natural story, and you would think that, well, we just let nature take its course and these guys would disappear. Part of the issue is 100 years old in that we didn't used to have, before we had landfills and dumps and so forth, we didn't used to have so many gulls. In fact, 100 years ago, gulls were considered quite rare. Now that we have provided with them easy access to food, the gull populations have increased, and so therefore their impact on the terns is more significant than it might not have been had we not provided them with this extra food availability.
Often there's a one-on-one correlation between environmental change and the increase of a particular species.
It is, and it is unusual that in this case the story is natural predators preying on a species that has become quite rare. More often than not, the storyline is something more direct that we are doing or have done to habitat or so forth to affect the species. And
what mammals are endangered or rare here in this state that we're not?
Well, we don't think too much about land mammals as being rare in New England. Most of the mammals that we think about here in Rhode Island are quite common, backyardy kind of things with raccoons and foxes and possums and so forth. The rare mammals that we have are actually marine-based, are offshore. So whales of one sort or another. Right whales are perhaps the rarest whale here perhaps in the entire Atlantic. Only about 450 or 500 of them around. We do see them coming through the waters of Block Island every year. Humpback whales, another one that's we see in Rhode Island waters every year. They are, in fact, both of them we have a good news story to tell in that they declined dramatically during the whale hunting years, several hundred years ago, and those whales are now increasing at a pretty good rate. Certainly humpback whales are in particular. There's a discussion about removing them from the endangered species list because now that we're not killing them by hunting them, their numbers are increasing and they're doing quite well.
But I also read in your book that about 50% of the whales have some damage from plastics, for example.
That is true. Not necessarily just plastics. The big issue
from weirs or
from human causes, absolutely. So while we're not intentionally killing them through whale hunting anymore, we are still the primary cause of large whale deaths through fishing gear entanglement, whales swimming through the waters and becoming entangled in mooring ropes and lobster trap ropes and buoys and so on, wrapping up those animals and essentially making them unable to move around, getting ropes caught in their jaws and so forth. And eventually many of them die. Sometimes they're able to they fall off naturally or rescuers are able to cut them free. And then cargo ships is the other big cause of death for large whales. Can't even imagine that a 50-foot whale would be something that someone on a boat wouldn't even notice was around, but certainly they're under the water and hard to see sometimes, and certainly these large cargo ships strike them relatively regularly, and those two causes of death are the primary reason that whales die in the waters around here.
But there are aerial surveillance cameras that are on different planes, and they watch for the whales in the fishing lanes. Is that not true?
That is true. Certainly with the right whales, which is, as I said, are the rarest of the whales around here, there's a good deal of effort going into monitoring them. They breed off the coast of northern Florida and Georgia and migrate up here in the wintertime. And certainly there are folks at the Provincetown Center for Coastal Studies that are really out there monitoring almost every day during the winter and spring, flying overhead, searching for the whales to count them and document their health status and so on. So there's lots of information about them. And in fact, you're right, that we even had to shift the shipping lanes going into Boston Harbor a few years ago because the whales seemed to be spending most of their time in the area which was the former shipping lane. So taking steps to try to avoid that problem by having the ships slow down in some cases, in some areas, and shifting shipping lanes when necessary.
And you've watched some rescues, haven't you, of dolphins or porpoises?
The one thing that I like to do with my books is I like to get sort of in the middle of all these projects. And for me, that's the fun part. I get to go have an adventure on every chapter that I write. Uh-huh. So I invite myself along, essentially, with biologists who are studying each of these creatures, and I spend a few days with them, sometimes more, and really get my hands on with the species that I'm writing about. And so, yes, I've spent time up in Maine studying harbor porpoises and helping to remove them from fishing nets that are used up in that neck of the woods.
How is that done? People have to swim with them, I understand.
Well, to some degree, the problem with the harbor porpoises up in New Brunswick and Maine is weir nets, which are sort of a circular net that's permanently located, and they're trying to capture as herring are swimming by. They swim into the net and they can't find the way to get out again. And sometimes the harbor porpoises follow those herring in and they can't get out. And so it's an effort to try to not sacrifice the fisherman's catch, but while also removing the harbor porpoise. Sometimes it does involve getting in the water. I didn't get to do that. That would have been pretty fun.
I don't know.
But it certainly was exciting to watch and to join in the effort.
How about sea turtles? I know you had let me show this book. You had a long chapter about sea turtles and how ancient they are and how important they are. and their different characteristics. So maybe you could talk a little bit about sea turtles.
Sure. We don't typically think of sea turtles as a creature that's around here in Rhode Island waters. We don't see them very much. Sea turtles breed on the beach, but they do so in the tropics. And so if you go on the beach down in Florida in May, June, July timeframe, in the middle of the night, if you just walk the public beaches down there, you will see sea turtles coming up on the beach.
And these are these huge ones, the
monstrous
leatherback?
Things. So there's several varieties. Loggerhead turtles are the most common ones. The leatherback is the rarest one, and I wrote in this book about the leatherbacks. And yes, monstrous creatures, about 1,200 pounds. They have a 6-foot-long shell. They're from flipper tip to flipper tip. It's about 9 feet. This is a monstrous creature that's been around for for millions of years. And while they breed on the beaches down in Florida, they come up here to southern New England during the summertime to feed primarily on jellyfish. And that's where the big concern about plastics comes in, because if we throw our sandwich bag into the water, it looks like a jellyfish and the turtles eat it. If we let our plastic grocery bag into the water, it looks like jellyfish and the turtles eat it. Almost every sea turtle that has been found dead in southern New England waters and had a necropsy, an autopsy done on it, they've found a mass of plastic in their digestive system. So
not just once, but several times.
Several times, multiple times, yes. So a mass of these of plastic bags and plastic materials that essentially get caught in their digestive system and causes them to die.
And so what are we doing now about the different turtles? What are we doing to try to protect them?
Sea turtles are hard to study here in New England because they don't breed on our beaches, so they never come to land. They are seen in our waters, but you can't really go out and catch a sea turtle in the water. It's very difficult to do. There is one small effort on the Cape that does that, tries to pull them up on their boat to be able to take some health measurements and learn more about them. But certainly many of these efforts that we hear all around the state and the region trying to ban plastic bags, part of that effort is because those bags blow into the water and ultimately lodge themselves into a wide variety of marine life, especially these sea turtles. So certainly those kind of efforts are trying to help sea turtles in our waters.
And what else have you watched being rescued?
Well, gosh, I've done so many different chapters. My first book, Golden Wings and Hairy Toes, focused on 14 rare species here in New England that are mostly land-based. This one here, Basking with Humpbacks, is all about the marine life and about a dozen species there that I focused on: seabirds and ducks and fish. The Atlantic wolffish is one that I'm particularly enamored of. It's kind of an ugly-looking thing, about 5 feet long, about an eel-like body, and awful, scary-looking teeth, and it's struggling with bycatch. It's a fish that lives at the bottom in a rocky mound of rocks, and as fishermen are dragging their big nets at the bottom to try to catch flounder and cod and the other targeted species, they're getting captured in these nets. There isn't really a market for them, so they mostly just toss them away, but it's causing a significant decline in that population. That's one that I spent some time on some commercial fishing vessels to learn about and observe and see how the fishermen can avoid catching them. They can throw them back, but because they're bottom feeders, by the time they get them up to the surface, they're generally injured or unable to be returned.
Change in pressure.
Change in pressure, exactly, yes.
Uh-huh. And when you watch these efforts to care for these fish, these huge things, what do you think about these scientists who are doing all of this? How do we support them? It seems to me they're doing arduous tasks so that we can have a future with our seawaters and with the fish.
The thing that first comes to mind for me when I'm out there with these biologists is, wow, what a job. And I wish I had done that. I wish I had started my career. If I were to start my career over again, I would probably become a biologist to do the work that they do. I'm just so impressed with the complexities of how they do the studies that they do, how they gather the information, and how and the steps that they take to try to protect these species. I spent some time with a biologist studying basking sharks. 35-foot-long shark, weighs 5 tons. 1/4 of its weight is its liver alone. An amazing creature that is more like whales than sharks. It doesn't have any teeth. it just sails through the water with its mouth open to feed on the plankton, somewhat like many of the whales do.
And that's why it needs a large liver?
And I'm not clear exactly why the liver needs to be so large. I know that livers on many shark species are especially large, but just the efforts that biologists have to undertake to try to learn even little bits of information about these species is really amazing to me.
And they're endangering themselves, is that right, a lot of times?
I'm not so sure they're endangering themselves. They certainly are taking safety precautions, but they are giving their all on a daily basis, year-round, trying to protect whatever species is that they have some attachment to and are seeking to study and learn about, so that, yes, as you say, so that we can continue to have a world where these creatures still thrive in our oceans.
What about Narragansett Bay? That's so much a part of Rhode Island. Did you do any studying about the bay and what's going on there?
I did a little bit. One of the species that I focused on is bay scallops. A species that we see on our menus occasionally in restaurants, although almost all the bay scallops we have around here in our restaurants are from farm-raised scallops, because the population of local bay scallops has declined so much. There's still decent wild populations around the Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. Not much around here. They depend on eelgrass. And so there's been a lot of efforts by Save the Bay and others in Rhode Island to try to restore the eelgrass beds that used to be around Narragansett Bay, in part to support and to provide habitat for bay scallops and other species. So that's one that I spent some time studying in Narragansett Bay. And then the other is, strangely enough, seaweed. We don't think too much about seaweed as an interesting species that we need to protect in our waters.
Provides a home or environment for so many species.
You're absolutely correct. So seaweed provides this wonderful habitat and food for all sorts of small marine life in the nearshore waters. And what's been happening lately has been we've been bringing in unintentionally some invasive, some non-native seaweed species that sort of seem to be taking over the native habitat, sort of clearing out-competing our native species, and that's become an issue. Interestingly, there was one seaweed species called Grottalupia, a species only known from Japan, and then about 10 years ago, it showed up at Beavertail, Jamestown, Rhode Island. So how it got from Japan to here, probably in the ballast of a ship, but it arrived here and has been spreading along the coastline. It's sort of a long purplish blade that's not so good for habitat for native species. The native snails and other creatures don't like to feed on it, so it's taking over, and there's nothing to keep it in check. So that's beginning to be an increasing problem, invasive species of seaweed that is sort of arriving and taking over.
So we need some human hands maybe to pull them all out.
Yeah,
although that would be a huge, huge project.
It would be a huge undertaking, and it's a challenge just even to monitor where it is and how far it's spread and so forth. That is the challenge with marine species in particular, that they are under the water, that they're not as easy to see as land-based creatures are, and so it becomes a bit of a challenge to collect accurate data about population numbers and ranges and so forth for underwater species.
Your last book, your most recent book, is about narwhals, Arctic whales, and in a melting world. Kind of a threatening topic in a way, because most of us don't want to know about how much the icebergs are melting, but this is a wonderful picture that you have on the back of the book of narwhals. I had heard that you were coming with the narwhal tusk. It is an absolutely amazing thing that they have this tooth that goes out of their lip, their upper lip, and it's possibly a way for the males to attract females. But anyway, they live in the Arctic. Tell us more about them.
So I became enamored of narwhals when I was 9 years old and flipping through the pages of the World Book Encyclopedia and stumbled across this bizarre-looking creature with this long spiral tusk sticking out of its face. This is a whale. It's about 15 feet long, weighs about 3,500 pounds, and it has two teeth in its mouth, one of which, its left tooth, grows straight through its upper lip and grows straight out in a leftward turning spiral for 8 feet. Its right tooth grows absolutely nowhere. It remains impacted in the jaw. Neither of them are any good for chewing. But this is an amazing animal that spends its life.
It takes its food in the same way, by inhaling it.
It absolutely does, yeah. So it just sucks in its food and swallows it because it can't do anything else. At any rate, so it lives exclusively in the Arctic. And when I finished my first 2 books about local species, I decided to get out of town, and I really went out of town far. Spent a week in a narwhal hunting camp at the northern tip of Greenland. Spent 3 weeks with a Canadian government research team, camped at the edge of a fjord in northern Canada, studying narwhals. It's been an amazing experience for me. Again, remember, I'm all about the adventure, and I had some great adventures studying these narwhals.
So you said something about fishing them. There are people who are still eating them.
There are people who are still eating narwhals. That's right. So narwhals. So the Inuit, the native communities in the far north of Canada and Greenland, still are. I mean, that's a traditional food for them, and so they do indeed hunt them. And when they catch a male, they're able to use it to sell its tusk. That has quite a bit of value, and then they eat its blubber and its muscle, and to keep warm, and basically just maintain their nutrition.
So the sea is so varied, it's an endless topic. There are people who are excited about the fact that in May we're seeing new kinds of whales, beluga whales, here in New England. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So the beluga whale is the closest relative to the narwhal. So both of them are about 15 feet long, similar, but both toothed whales, although belugas have a much more normal-looking tooth than the narwhal does. And belugas are found in a much more wide variety of habitats. There's in southern Alaska. They're all the way across the northern part of North America, as far down as the St. Lawrence Seaway, almost as far as Quebec City. And for the last 2 years in a row, we have had beluga whales showing up in our waters. Never before had there been belugas ever sighted in Rhode Island waters until last year, oddly enough, on Father's Day, and this year on Mother's Day, we've had sightings of beluga whales.
Some people would say that's... Anyway.
Yes, they would say something.
But do you think they're looking for something to eat? Do you think that some of the sea change in temperature has allowed new fish to come here, and therefore they're looking for more food?
It's a really good question, and nobody seems certain. I've talked to Rhode Island's marine mammal expert, Bob Kenny, at the Graduate School of Oceanography at URI. He seems to think it's just a coincidence that we've had sightings 2 years in a row. He said that the animals from one year to the next were different. They weren't the same animals, so it wasn't that they had gotten used to a migratory pathway and just have returned. It's a good question. Why are they here? If they're from the St. Lawrence Seaway population, which is the closest population to Rhode Island, how would they know what our environmental conditions are to come here? How would they know that we might have different species or more fish or something? It's a really good question. Why would they be coming here when they'd never been here before?
Are they safe?
They seem to be. Both times there have been folks from Mystic Aquarium and URI that have been monitoring them, and they seem to be healthy animals. Why they're here, nobody really seems to know, but they are known to wander. They have been seen often, every few years, I suppose, around the Cape Cod area. There have been a few records around Long Island and as far down as Delaware. Just the first time we've had them here in Rhode Island.
It's amazing what is in that sea around us, which is 2/3 of the earth. We're still learning all kinds of things, and you're helping us to learn about them. So thank you very much, Todd McLeish. We wish you well with all of your books and with whatever new adventure you find.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching Good News Rhode Island, the show about Rhode Island and you, the people who make it happen. We're sure that there's good news around here, and I bet you live near the sea. Take a look. Thank you.